Hello, everyone. My name is Will,
This is Sen.
and a project we're doing on is about fatal police killing. The motivation behind doing this research is the George Floyd movement back in 2020. The movement back then spurred a lot of controversy, and the entire US actually had a lot of doubt for the justice system we have. And so we were doing this project to look at the history and to see if anything has changed over the years ever since the movement.
About our dataset, our primary source is the Washington Post, the police fatal killing data from 2015 till now. And our secondary data is the police killing data in 2015 from GitHub. The Washington Post database contains records of every fatal shooting in the United States by a police officer in the line of duty since January 1st, 2015. Firstly, we want to ask, is there biases? To be more specific, our question is, are there certain racial group who have higher proportions of victims? Get a basic understanding of whether people of a certain race or some certain races are more likely to be killed by the police. We first investigate how many people from each race are killed by police in the US. From the graph, we can see that most people killed by the police are white, black, or Hispanic. Especially, the number of white people killed by the police is the highest. However, considering the situation that white people is the most populated race in the US, we normalize the data. After normalizing the data, we get that the proportion of black people killed by the police is the highest, and the proportion of white people is the lowest. Meanwhile, the difference between these two proportions is huge. In conclusion, without taking any other factors into account, the proportion of black people killed by police is much higher than that of the white people in the US since 2015. Secondly, we want to ask, is anywhere safer? More specifically, is the incidence of fatal police killing relatively the same across different states and regions? To start with, we have a map highlighting people killed by police all over the country and a bar graph showing the top 10 states with the most people killed by police. We can see that in the map, killings are mostly located at the coastal area and at the eastern area, where the population is high. In the bar graph, the top one state is California, which is the most populated state in the US. As a result, to get a better understanding of the proportion of people killed by police, we made a new bar graph with our normalized data. We could see that the states with the highest proportion of people killed by police is Alaska, which is surprising. Though the number of people killed by police in Alaska since 2015 is ranked as the 7th in the country, it could be mainly attributed to the really low population of Alaska. Among the top ones in this graph, Arizona and Colorado don't have this issue. The possible reasons behind their high proportions of people killed by police might be that a permit is not required to carry a gun openly in these two states. And Colorado doesn't require gun owners to give a reason for wanting a permit. However, more reasons behind this are left to be answered with future work.
The third question we have is, has anything changed over the years? And more specifically, we want to ask if there's a sign of decrease for the number of fatal incidents over the years, and if not, has the situation been improved since the George Floyd movement? And it is critical to examine how the number of fatal police killing incidents have decreased over the years. In order to do so, we compare the sum of deaths on a yearly basis and plot them along a graph to observe the presence of any relationship. And based on the findings, we find that as the year progresses, the number of fatal incidents also increases linearly. And moreover, the graph has two interesting findings. We have the sharp decrease in 2016 and the continuous increase from 2020 to 2021. And if we look at the events that took place in 2016, the most possible explanation for the increase, for that sharp decrease, is either by chance or the presidential election. But it is, however, very hard to explain the increase in 2020 to 2021, given the incident of presidential election, COVID-19, and the George Floyd movement. While the number of police killings seems to linearly increase over the years, the relationship cannot be generalized to all the racial groups. So it is critical to see whether killings of particular groups have changed over the years, especially those of the Black and Hispanic. Given the two groups have the largest proportions of fatal police killings overall. And looking at the variations of killings for different racial groups over time, we observe that the number of deaths over years have remained relatively steady for Black and Hispanic populations. And the number of whites, on the other hand, sees general net decrease up to 2020. And interestingly, all the groups have a sharp decrease in terms of the numbers of deaths from 2020 to 2021. One might rush to conclude that this is due to the eruption of COVID-19 and the George Floyd protest. However, under closer observation, one will see a sharp increase in the unknown NA racial group in 2021. With more observations of the names of the victims whose racial status is NA from the dataset, we actually find that the victims' names are from various racial groups. And if we actually add the population of NA groups together with other groups in 2021, we will observe an overall net increase in total amount of killings in 2021, which is consistent with the previous data in the graph. Hence, it is safe to conclude that the police have actually drastically increased their protection of the victim's racial identity ever since 2020. While it is possible to conjecture that this may be due to the pressure of the George Floyd movement, we don't have enough evidence.
To see whether trends of the number of people killed by police are different in different states, we selected the top 6 states with the highest proportion of people killed by police and separated the data by state. From the graph, we can see that the trends in different states are pretty similar. As a result, it's safe to analyze the trendings generally without taking a closer look at the differences between states.
And in order to gain a deeper insight into whether there is presence of bias when it comes to the fatal incidence of Black and Hispanic racial groups, we attempt to look at the proportions of people from Black, Hispanic, and white racial groups killed given their armed status. Moreover, we have specifically composed 2 separate graphs, one with year before 2020 and one with after 2020, to see if the incident of George Floyd movement has actually reduced bias, if the evidence of bias does exist. And from the graphs, we can see that there is indication of bias, since proportionally there are more incidents of fatal police killings of unarmed Black and Hispanic compared to white. It is, however, comforting to see that in 2021, there's a gradual decrease of the proportions for Black and Hispanic. So the main takeaway from the entire research is that Black and Hispanics actually have highest likelihood of facing fatal police killing proportionally. Secondly, Alaska actually has the highest frequency of police killing incidents, even though California has the most deaths. The third takeaway is that over the years, the killing numbers has not decreased despite the police brutality movement, but the proportion of unarmed Black, Hispanic killed after the protest has actually decreased.
The reasons behind the difference between proportions of Black and white people killed by police are still waiting to be answered by future work, since this is a huge social problem and has been debated for a long while. The reasons why some states are neither fully revealed as to get a causal effect, we need more data and more advanced tools in statistical and other areas. What exact factors cause the change of the trend is another question left for future work, because based on what we have, we could only provide a possible reasoning in our hypothesis.
Thank you.
Thank you.